On this week's Carrier App, we speak with iConnective on its work in the mobile telecom space, including work with trade industry group CTIA on its common shortcode program and the importance of security for the program. Okay, well, thanks for joining us for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer. I'm editor-in-chief here at RCR Wireless News. And this week, we are joined by Mark Baker, who's the OpenStack product manager at Canonical, talk a bit about the company and about kind of the OpenStack space and how it all applies to this world of virtualization that's going on out there. So, hey, Mark, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Oh, hi, Dan. Well, thank you for inviting me.
Very good. All right. Well, let's start off with maybe, for those who don't know much about the company, if you want to give a little maybe insight into Canonical, maybe kind of the founding, kind of where you guys are focused in terms of the market out there, for the company. Let's start off with that.
Sure. So Canonical is a company behind Ubuntu. Ubuntu and Canonical were founded at the same time, actually, towards the end of 2004, by the same gentleman, same founder. And Ubuntu is a project. It's an open source project and a Linux-based operating system that runs actually in many different places today. So we had an initial focus on ease of use and on the desktop, trying to make Linux more easily used by regular users, right? Not sort of non-experts. And that grew into a focus for ease of use, actually in developer space on cloud. And so we invested heavily in making Ubuntu a great platform to run on a great operating system to run as a guest on platforms such as Amazon Web Services, and then more lately Google and Azure and other types of clouds. And as part of that work, we've grown into supporting cloud infrastructure, OpenStack being the most popular cloud infrastructure around today. And but then more recently, some of the emerging container technologies, Kubernetes and Docker and Mesos too. So that's very much the space that we're in, and we're fully committed to open source. We're fully committed to having our platforms and our technologies freely available to users all around the world.
All right, makes sense. Now, I guess what's your current view on the pace of development and deployment of, I guess we want to stick with OpenStack, maybe like, I guess the pace of the development and deployment of OpenStack in the not just the data center world, but also kind of the telecom space as well.
Yeah, of course. So OpenStack really came about as a result of a demand for on-premises cloud infrastructure. And in fact, not just on-premises, it was a demand for an open source set of tools to be able to develop and deploy cloud infrastructure. And we were very early into that, one of the founding members of OpenStack. And that was back in 2000, towards the end of 2010, 2011, it really started. It has been quickly adopted by certainly a lot of the large technology companies. And so if you look at the OpenStack Foundation, when they talk about the use cases, they have some pretty big names, some big customers, big companies that are running large amounts of their infrastructure now on OpenStack as a cloud platform. These are companies like Walmart and Best Buy, AT&T, and Comcast and others. So it's been adopted by a lot of those big technology players. As part of that, I mentioned AT&T. Telcos have really taken to OpenStack as well, and this is because they themselves telcos are going through this transition in terms of the old business was traditional business has been voice calls over fixed lines or then mobile lines, but of course it's all about data now for them. And so if you talk to the likes of AT&T, they will say that actually the largest amount of traffic they're carrying is video, right? And so video and over the top services, those kind of things. And so that in the application space, and that means that they not only need to be able to develop new services very rapidly themselves, but they also need, they have new competitors in the space. And so whether it's, the likes of people like WhatsApp or Netflix and others that are now delivering services very much in the territory that those telcos would like to do, they need to become a little more agile, a little more I don't know whether it's startup-like in their thinking or
It's a new mindset.
certainly a little. Yeah, it's a different mindset. So they need to, telcos have hundreds, in some cases, 100 years of infrastructure that they've built, right? And so, but now, in order to keep pace with development, they need to start thinking a little different. As you say, change their mindset. And some of that means changing the technologies they're using. From vendors like Ericsson and Nokia and Alcatel and others. So have those have been solutions which have been very robust. Dial tone is always there when you pick up the phone, and people talk about telco grade as being, if you like, the benchmark for high availability and robustness. Mm-hmm. And they've done a great job of those, but they need to be able to deliver things faster, and that means virtualizing, if you like, certain aspects of their infrastructure. And OpenStack is a means or a framework by which they can virtualize some of these network services, some of these over-the-top services, such that they can develop and then deliver them much faster than they could where they're using the solutions that are integrated with the hardware.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting. Whenever I talk to operators out there, it does seem like OpenStack is often used as kind of the benchmark in terms of their move towards this virtualization world, because OpenStack does seem to be perhaps one of the more advanced open source platforms out there for them to use as they move towards the software world. And so it does seem like that at least the pace of the development is being looked at favorably by the telecom world. And like you said, operators do have certain service level requirements or certain expectations. And it does seem like, at least in terms of meeting those, OpenStack does seem like it's one of the most, I guess, forward-looking or at least forward-facing platforms out there that kind of help operators do this.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's two things really, predominantly. One is that OpenStack is open source. And so telecom operators want to know that they're not going to get sort of trapped in go down a path that's going to be very hard for them to back out of one day, or be beholden to a single vendor. They want flexibility and they want options. OpenStack, because it's open source, means that they can, to a large extent, control their own destiny if they want to. They can have full access to the code. They can help steer its development. And that leads very much into the second benefit, which is it's a very fast-moving collaborative environment. So you look at who's working on OpenStack. There's large contributions from people like Deutsche Telekom, people like AT&T, people like NTT, who are all collaborating in this space on the technology to develop the functions and features at a pace they need to be able to deliver this cloud platform in a way that's robust, reliable, and feature-rich enough for them to develop the services they want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess how important is it to have all these big companies involved in this? Because I've talked to companies in the past or organizations in the past, and there's always a bit of a challenge in terms of getting, I guess, the interest of all these large companies to all kind of be on the same page. Because again, a lot of these companies are competing with each other in the market. But to get them all involved on the same page in terms of moving forward, I guess OpenStack as an example, I guess how important is it to have everybody part of this? Is it a good thing? Is it a tough thing? Is it more of a challenge? I guess what's your view on how that all kind of works together?
Well, I mean, certainly there are different opinions about how certain problems should be addressed. And there's certainly no shortage of those in any open source community, right? So, I wouldn't say everybody is necessarily exactly on the same page. There are certain things that everybody, accepts that they need to do. It needs to be fast. It needs to be robust. It needs to be highly available. And there are communities and projects that are built or very either on OpenStack or very closely related to OpenStack. Things like the OPNFV, the OpenNFV community that OpenStack is a part of their larger framework that can involves the orchestration of those telecom services. But within those frameworks themselves, there are different solutions. So you may want to use a particular type of hypervisor, and again, different opinions on those. There may be different choices around software-defined networking or indeed software-defined storage, with different companies favoring different solutions, either for feature reasons or political reasons. Sometimes these things come into play. So I mean, there are definitely different opinions out there. The nice thing about an open source community, though, is that you can still collaborate on the things that make sense to collaborate on together. You can present different options, and where you want to be able to differentiate at a particular level, maybe as a feature, it's a capability, it's an application or a service, you can do that. And you know, for a lot of these telcos, it makes sense. They want to be able to compete on services to the customer, but the actual underlying infrastructure, it makes no difference if you're, you know, AT&T or Verizon, you still got to connect that call, you've still got to pass that data. So working out a way where you can share the cost between you to develop that in a sensible way is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, not to downplay the politics of it all, because politics is the fun part of it all, but it does seem like, in general, when you get the engineers involved, away from the politics, it does seem like everybody is very collaborative. And when I talk to people about this, it just seems like, you know, when you go to these open source community groups and these different events, it seems like the people involved typically are looking to fix a solution. They're not really worried about the politics of it all. So it does seem like behind the scenes that everybody is working pretty well together. It's just a matter of, you know, a lot of times the media, we see some, you know, perhaps some more of the public facing stuff, but it does seem like at least behind the scenes, things are working pretty smoothly then.
Oh yes, and if you look at, there are these companies that are part of it. There is, you know, in OpenStack, for example, there's Canonical, but some of our competitors, of course, there's companies like Cisco and Juniper who are competing with one another, and there's many examples like that. You know, there's Dell and HP and IBM, and so, but whilst we will all compete, you know, for customers and for revenue, for deals at one end of the business, our engineers are to a large extent isolated from that, right? So they are looking at how they will solve a problem, what's the right technical way, and they'll collaborate with you know, a competitor, as it were, to solve that problem. But you know, the competition happens at very much at the sales end of the business.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess how is the work involved in terms of the interoperability part of all this? I mean, it does seem like that, like you said earlier, I mean, operators and even all the customers really want to have platforms and be able to plug things in that work, that they don't have to worry about how these things work together with somebody else's platform. They, you know, they want to avoid that vendor lock model. That's kind of, at least in telecom space, been a pretty big part of it. Does it seem like that the vendor community out there, in terms of working through the open source communities, are they working in the right direction in terms of making sure that there is good interoperability between all these different platforms that are being pushed out to commercial use?
Yes, so initiatives like OPNFV, or communities, I should say, like OPNFV, are very much focused around those standards. That's, you know, in the telecom space. And a lot of that is built on standards work that was done by ETSI, the technology, I forget what the acronym stands for, but ETSI, the Telecommunications Standards Institute, and that originally kind of defined how the virtualization of these telecom services could be achieved. And so those groups, again, are made up of, you know, potentially many competing different operators, but they understand that, you know, if you make a call in the US and I'm based in here in the UK, we have to be able to connect those things. And when I visit the US, I still want my cell phone to work. So it's the fact that those things work today are because there are agreed standards, and those standards benefit everybody. At the OpenStack level, there's also initiatives to ensure interoperability. So whilst there are competing OpenStack distributions distributions or offers from different companies, as a customer, you want to ensure, well, I want to make sure if I buy an OpenStack from Canonical or if I buy it from a different vendor, it's going to look and behave in the same way. It's going to have the same degree of compatibility. I can launch my applications in the same way, and be sure that, you know, I've got that interoperability. I don't have to redevelop applications because I'm running on a different flavor. And that is what gives customers the reassurance they can take a technology like OpenStack and deploy it and know the distribution, that they're not going to be locked in to a particular company.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I guess as you look, you know, in terms of I guess the robustness of OpenStack today, it does seem like we were saying earlier, I mean, obviously the operators, the ones I've talked to at least, are all, you know, very, very supportive of OpenStack, are really behind the movement there. Does it seem like, from your point of view, that operators can today deploy an OpenStack type of solution to kind of increase their agility out there in the market and be confident that it can handle what operators need today? Or do you think are we still kind of along that development cycle where, you know, it's getting there, maybe not quite there today, but it's definitely getting there?
Oh, no, there are absolutely operators that have services, certainly good European examples. If you're placing a telephone call in Germany or in Croatia, for example, that is being routed at some point through an OpenStack cloud, right? So if you call the equivalent of 911, yeah, you will at some point that will touch OpenStack. And the operator is only going to do that if they are 100% certain that they've got the robustness, reliability, and availability of that platform in place. And the same is true in companies like AT&T and others too. We know that they are running open production services on OpenStack today. Not all of it is involved directly in the I guess the carrier side of the business, the network side of the business. And we do see a lot of those telcos, because of their coming under pressure from managed service providers or cloud providers, the likes of Amazon and others, that are starting to offer cloud services in their geography, and they will do that with very often with a particular value add. So telcos have this advantage. They own the network, they own the cable and the fiber that goes under the street. So they can offer services that are very hard for other people to be able to do. They can offer guarantees around network performance and latency and those things. And so we see this again in Europe, and data protection laws also come into play here, or data sovereignty, where they're building clouds saying we can offer you degrees of security or performance that it's very hard for one of those other cloud providers to be able to deliver. Many of them are doing that with OpenStack too, which is great to see.
Yeah, that's a good point there. It does seem like your operators are kind of pretty confident in that move, at least for today. So, well, I guess maybe looking ahead a bit, I mean, what are some of the maybe bigger challenges you see for the OpenStack community and for Canonical in general as you kind of move down this continuing road of kind of this evolution of networks out there? I mean, what are some of the challenges you see, and I guess how surmountable are those challenges?
Well, there's the challenges, I guess, to a large extent, dealing with the pace of development, dealing with the speed of innovation, because companies, I know they're much overused examples, but companies like Google and Facebook and others have really raised the bar in organizations' expectation of how quickly you can do things now. And so for operators to be able to keep abreast of the new technology changes, OpenStack is a great platform for being able to deliver some of these cloud services. Not all of the, as we call them, VNFs, the virtualized network function vendors, the people that produce the applications that will connect the call or manage the data or whatever, have their applications cloud ready, right? And so there's a certain amount of redevelopment that has to go on, and that in some cases can slow down the implementation of these projects. And there is a lot of work that Canonical is doing. We have a VNF performance and interoperability lab that we work with vendors in to try and help accelerate some of that and test it and understand the costing model around how these applications are going to perform on an OpenStack. But there's also new technologies coming in at the same time, and so we've got things such as containers, which are a hot topic, which have come, been around for a little while, but with container orchestration tools like Kubernetes, we have a product in that space too. Telcos are very interested to understand, okay, what does that mean for me? Can I now deliver network applications even faster, with greater performance? And so it's being able to encompass these things into these frameworks, into these communities, but again, meeting those requirements of the high availability, the robustness, the telco grade, if you like.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, maybe maybe focus a bit on that container thing, because it does seem like containers kind of really gained a lot of attention last year. I mean, I'm sure before that you guys were working on them for a while, but it did seem like last year containers became kind of a hot topic. I know going to a lot of different events, a lot of different shows, they were talked about a lot. I guess how has that kind of pace of development kind of progressed? Because like you said, the orchestration aspect of it is still a bit of a challenge, but I guess how do you view maybe that specific market kind of evolving at this point?
So it's I mean, certainly containers have become extremely popular with developers because they're a great way to be able to package, to design, develop, package an application, and then deploy it, across a distributed architecture. And so what's often referred to as a move towards microservices. So you can package very discrete components of your application into a container. The containers are quite not quite, they're very portable, that you can move them around fairly easily. We've worked hard on a technology called LexD as the Linux container technology to be able to do things like live migrate containers, snapshot them and pause them and restart them. Again, those kind of features that telcos are looking for. So that has come along very, very quickly. it's fair to say that I don't think containers are running the core networks of telcos yet today. Always happy to be proved wrong, but those, because they're relatively new, and they're still sort of integration with some of the sort of software-defined networking technologies. Those things are still sort of fleshing out right now, but they've really captured the heart of developers because they are a very good way to get performance benefits, latency benefits from the underlying hardware in a way that's very hard to achieve if you're using a virtual machine, a traditional VM on a hypervisor.
Yeah, and it does seem like the container movement, that's what's kind of happened there, is kind of highlights, like you said earlier, the fact that there's this kind of pace of development and evolution going on. And it seems like, again, every year some new technology pops up that operators, maybe weren't ready for, the industry wasn't kind of like looking at, and all of a sudden it's this whole new wave of something going on. And it does seem like for companies like yourself, you have to be really, really, really open and flexible to being able to kind of just, whatever new comes down the road, you got to be ready to kind of tackle it and see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, another challenge with that actually is you look at the communities and the standards bodies that sit around these. There are several different container standards emerging. Which is always the case with new technologies that people will agree on standards, and it's the old joke about standards. How many standards do you want? We've got very many different ones. And it'll take a while for these things to shake down. And the same is true. If you look at up the telco stack, there are different standards or initiatives around things such as the orchestration of DNS, how the business logic of determining where you're going to place a given network function in your architecture based upon the needs of the network, the needs of your clients. Telcos need to automate all of those things and have it, again, very robust so that they can react very quickly to changes in their consumers or their customers' behavior. And of course, there are several standards emerging or competing, you could say, as to which is the right way to do that. And over time, one or maybe two of those will emerge as the leading one. But that's still work in progress. So.
Yeah, it's always interesting to talk a little bit about standards when you're looking at open source, because it does seem like those two worlds are perhaps not in the same universe at all. I mean, you look at, obviously the open source community is always trying to evolve things and not to be pinned down whenever they don't need to be. But obviously you have to have standards at some point in the process, or companies aren't comfortable with deploying it. So it does seem like that standards work and the open source work obviously are kind of having to work together in terms of at the end of the day having some agreement in terms of letting operators be comfortable with what they're deploying out there.
Oh yes, yeah, but we participate in as many of those standards bodies as we can. So obviously we're part of OpenStack, we're part of OPNFV, where there's the I get the acronyms wrong now, but there's the OpenMano, there's ONOS over in the Far East, and so we're involved in many of those and supporting them where we can and certainly keeping tabs on them. So wherever those go and whatever the consensus among the operators and carriers, whatever that is. Then we'll hopefully be there to support them in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, the open source community is great for new acronyms. We always need more acronyms in this world, so obviously that's the best part of it, if anything else. So we always got that.
Well, since I've been working with the telcos and carriers over the last few years, I thought we had a monopoly on the acronyms, but there's a whole world of carrier and telco acronyms out there that I was unaware of. So
yeah, there's a lot of them out there, that's for sure. Well, hey, Mark, we definitely appreciate the insight on the topic today. Obviously, we could talk about this for another couple hours, go down different rabbit holes here. But again, we definitely appreciate kind of catching up with you guys and getting some insight into the topic. So thanks so much for the time today, and hopefully we'll touch base again soon. Well, thanks for watching this week's show, and make sure to check out our next Carrier App when we are scheduled to speak with Hyla Mobile about the device trading market. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.